Another book recommended by my writing group. This one was provided to me when I requested some non-Star Trek sci-fi worth reading. As requested, it was a new author and a new setting, so it was perfect for the breath of fresh air I requested. The majority of the story takes place aboard the Greatship Athens, a massive sword-shaped vessel on a mission to collect trade materials to exchange with the alien race known colloquially as the Starfish, who provide the human race with the raw material known as xenoglass, the base for most of their manufacturing and production. The protagonist is a midshipper named Marca Nbaro, a young woman who secures herself a place on one of the galaxy's great ships, massive vessels whose purpose is to travel across the expanse of human-occupied space transporting goods for trade. Coming aboard under false pretenses, she does her best to integrate into the crew and forge a new life in her efforts to leave the old one behind. Something is destroying the great ships. Massive vessels, kilometers long, with a crew of thousands. These vessels are the lifeblood of humanity's trade with an unknown alien race on the edge of human-occupied space. To forge a new life, Marca sacrifices everything for the chance to journey into space, but she may have simply traded one danger for another. So this book was longer than most of the books I'm used to reading. It took probably twice as long to finish, which I note only because I didn't realize until I had gone through a couple of vlogs that I record every other week and noticed I was still going. With that said, it was an enjoyable experience. I think it also helped me chill out a bit as far as time management because although I'm doing pretty well on keeping up with the reviews, I also realized I'm far enough ahead that I have a good lead time if a title takes longer. As long as it's a good book, it's usually worth it. The story was interesting, telling the tale of the Athens and her crew as they make their way out to Trade Point, the farthest reaches of the human-controlled area of space. Trading with an alien race they call the Starfish, they exchange it for a critical material worth its weight in gold. I enjoyed the story for the most part. The sections dealing with trade were interesting and the battle scenes well written. I thought that Marca was an entertaining and enjoyable character for the most part, especially her interactions with her roommate Thea Drake. The unusual chemistry between her and Dorcas, a specialist assigned to the ship for a mission most of the crew knows nothing about, caught my attention early on and forms a central relationship later in the book. The technology was well described and I thought the aliens were well developed. The story highlights the complexity of communicating with alien life, especially because for most of the story they do not have the ability to communicate other than to exchange goods for xenoglass. As far as the negatives go, I thought that the promise of her new life being threatened by her secret really wasn't all that relevant later on. Other than an early attempt to sabotage her journey onto the ship and her own fears of being found out, these things don't really appear relevant past the middle of the book. In fact, I can't recall if it came up again at all after the midpoint. If it did, then the captain of the ship, referred to as the Master, didn't care. Nevertheless, it seems that if the plot point is so relevant early on, that it should have come up again later somehow. I'd also like to point out that one of the revelations later in the book didn't seem well set up to me. The character guilty of the act in question really wasn't that major of a character, and it was over so quickly that it scarcely seemed like it registered a comment at all. Without spoiling the details, I'd say that it just felt like when you knew what was going on, it was just like, so? There wasn't much of a ripple afterwards, and I didn't really know the character other than a few minor scenes, so it just felt empty. The only other thing I'd like to mention is that the end of the book is action-heavy, and this seemed odd to me because I expected it to wrap up by then. But while I can't remember whether I knew this or not, while the main plot was somewhat resolved in that they arrived at Trade Point and saved the day more or less, it basically said to find the rest of the story, read Book 2, which I still have somewhat mixed feelings on. I mean, I suppose if you have more than one book that's fine, but it didn't really feel to me like the book wrapped up with enough of a denouement before it announced Part 2. It reminded me a bit of how movies started breaking up into Part 1 and Part 2, which I guess even though in some cases I love a good cliffhanger, it also seems like with the first book, maybe it would have hit me smoother if there had been an awareness that this was not a self-contained story. Would I recommend it? It was a good read, though be aware from the start it's not just a single book. If you like werewolves, check out my book Blue Moon, available in paperback and ebook on Amazon. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, click the subscribe button and leave a comment below. See you next time.